Hey everyone, welcome to A Mess Nonetheless. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Melissa, and we are sisters. And hello, everyone. Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
I am in long sleeves and a vest, and Rachel's in a tank top.
Well, it's not warm enough right now to be in a tank top, but I did remove my outer layer, but it will be
Reveal
warm
the
enough
tank
this
top.
afternoon to be in a tank top.
Ugh, not here.
Oh my gosh!
I'm
But you look
freezing, so I put a
you
vest
look
on.
cuter than me for sure. I wish I was wearing. What is that? Like a fuzzy little sheep vest?
Yes. So the sign said, "Buy my fuzzy little sheep vest," and so I was
So
like, "Okay, I will buy
I have one like that, and it's olive green. And I've had a few friends say it looks like Oscar the Grouch.
Oh, funny. So
Melissa's.
it's from Walmart. It's reversible. It's
Shut
tan on one
up.
side, and then it's Sherpa
It's cropped?
sheepy. Yep, it's a little bit
Oh,
shorter,
it's so
which I
cute.
don't have arms to push up on. I was going to show you.
You have arms. Oh, you mean like chair arms? Okay, sorry
Yeah.
guys. We forget that not all of you are on YouTube, so
Oh,
we'll
yeah.
move on.
Yeah.
She's
There's
wearing
a
a
lot
super
of
cute-
entertaining stuff to watch, though.
a lot. So today we're going to talk about community, and we're going to talk about the ways that Jesus modeled community and things that we can take from it. So, so would you say there's probably like three different categories of people in community? There's like the one extreme where it's like, I want to be invited to everything. You know, I have major FOMO. And then the other extreme is like, I don't really need anybody. I'm good.
Don't ever ask me to do anything.
Exactly. And then the middle is like, or not the middle, but the other one is kind of like,
Kind of in the middle, I would say.
I guess kind of in the middle. I just have my close people and I really don't want to deal with anyone else.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah,
those three kind of
probably.
groups. Yeah. And I think we can be in all three of them in different ways and at different times. Even
Yes,
on the
for
same
sure.
week, I think I can be all three of those people.
Yeah.
But as far as like if you take your whole life for the last 5 years as an adult or whatever and you average it out, it's like which one? I think most people land in at least one of them.
Yeah.
So in reading the Gospels and the life of Jesus, we see a few different things that Jesus did in community, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So the first one is Jesus was often surrounded by people, and he seemed to fully embrace his role in like a large body of people. And I mean, we could read you 20 verses of crowds were going along with him. Crowds were pressing in. He went there and a crowd gathered. Crowds followed him from here to there. You know, here's another crowd. There's another crowd, right?
Everywhere there's a crowd.
You get a crowd and you get a crowd. And that's what we see. And Jesus was not afraid to be with large groups of people. And what I love so much is that that's where he did his ministry.
Yeah.
He did his miracles there and he preached things there and he showed God's goodness and God's faithfulness and his love and compassion for people. And it was always in these larger groups.
Yeah. And they were huge groups. I mean, they weren't just like 100
Thousands
people.
and thousands. Yeah.
Thousands and thousands. And yeah, huge. And he didn't even have a microphone. I always think that's amazing.
I know.
How did everyone at the back hear him?
And how'd they keep their kids quiet?
Oh, I bet they weren't. I bet they were running all over the place. That's probably why the kids weren't included. It was only men who were counted.
The women were with the children.
Women were running away after the children.
I bet they weren't. It's interesting to think about what children were like in Jesus' day.
Yeah.
Are they just as terrible as we are today?
Also just as wonderful.
Just as wonderful. We do love our children. And so I'm just thinking like, okay, if we were learning from Jesus, like he might have been the most comfortable with his small group of people. And we'll talk about what that looked like later. But at the end of the day, like he got out and was with people. And I'm thinking we have to get out of our comfort zone. Like we have to start being with people. We can't just be with our favorite people or all alone. Like we have to be with other people. And I'm kind of like, I don't just mean hosting gatherings or attending gatherings. I mean things like when our kid joins a new team, are we getting to know the parents and their kids? Or are we just hanging out with the one person we already know?
Yeah.
Like, are we making those connections? Are we going out of our way, you know, to make connections with people?
To meet new people. Yeah.
Exactly. Are we having conversations with new neighbors when we move into a house or they move into a house? You know, or we just, hey, we just wanted to say hi and introduce ourselves. Here's our number if you ever need anything. You don't have to bake cookies. I certainly have never baked cookies for something.
Certainly never.
Certainly never. And, you know, but just like, we want you to know we're here and, you know, make those connections.
Open the door to communication.
Exactly. And, or meeting the new family at church, you know, or new people who come to church. There's so many times I think people think other people will do that.
Yeah.
But then people show up and they feel lonely because maybe nobody did it. And it's like,
that is something my husband is so gifted at.
Yes, he is.
Has an eye for all the people who have never been there. He's like, that family's new and that family, and I've never seen those
he
people.
should be like at the connection table.
And then he goes and talks to them. He doesn't just point them out to me.
I
It's
love
my
that.
least favorite, like, it's not my favorite thing, like, because I don't like small talk, and everyone's trying to get out of church, and, like, it's,
Mhm.
being a church, and, like, especially if you have little kids,
He wants
but
people to feel welcome.
he does, and he's amazing at it, yeah.
I love that. Well, and I know for me, like, I don't prefer to be with groups of people. I don't prefer to meet new people. I absolutely prefer to be comfortable. I love my
Mhm.
comfort zone. Do you love your comfort zone, Melissa?
I love my comfort zone.
It's my favorite place to be.
Who doesn't
I
love
mean,
their comfort zone?
I know. I mean, who doesn't? Most of our comfort zone is with our most comfortable people,
Yep,
the people just the easiest to hang out with, the ones
yep,
that, you just, whatever, you can grab together or get together
yeah,
last minute or whatever. But Jesus had his inner circle. He had his comfort zone of people,
mhm. His
and he
12.
chose to
Mhm,
step out of that in
mhm.
order to be good news to people. And I think if we're going to model or, live like Jesus modeled, that means that we have to step out of our comfort zone in order to love people, serve
Yeah,
them, show them who Jesus is, show them what he's done in our life. And I don't mean like stand on their door and knock, do you know Jesus? I mean like just be in their lives and then
yeah,
let our relationship with Jesus be evident to
yes,
all.
yeah.
But in order
Well,
to do that, we have to
I
be
used to tell my
willing.
kids sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, in order to do that, we have to be willing to be with more than our most comfortable 5 to 10 people.
Right.
There's no way around it.
Well, and if you are in a place where you're like, I don't know how to be good news to people about Jesus, like that terrifies
Mhm.
me. That
Yeah.
feels uncomfortable. Something I used to tell my kids as they were growing into a place where they're like, I want to be good news to people, but I don't know how to talk about Jesus. And I was like, to be honest, you don't actually even have to say his name. If you are living in a way that is lining up with him, people are going to notice something different. And
Yes.
eventually that conversation is going to be so natural, you're not even going to have had to have started because
Yeah.
people notice when Jesus is actively a part of your life, when you
Yep.
allow him to you can't look like the world. You just can't. Even if you don't know what that looks like, even if you
Mhm.
look at the mirror and you're like, I have no idea what looks different about me than before I knew Jesus, or if I didn't know Jesus, the people around you can see something is
It's
different,
true.
even if they can't name it. And so
It's
if
true.
it
That's the
terrifies you
goal.
to say God's name or Jesus'
Mhm.
name to people, just start with letting him be a part of your life and being a part of other
Mhm.
people's lives, and it'll
Well,
be
and a
seen.
lot of times when you're meeting new people, they're like, they'll find out you go to church for whatever.
Mhm.
You're like, oh, what'd you do last night when we
Mhm.
had this event at our church or whatever?
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't have to be like, I love Jesus. Do you? It's just like,
Right.
people know you go to church. People ask me a lot. Well, tell me about your church. Where is
Yeah.
it? What do you like about it? Or you're the guys that have the food pantry? Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like, and they're like, oh, how
Yeah.
do I find out information about food pantry? Well, follow us on Instagram, and it's like,
Yeah. Mhm.
it's an easy thing to do is just kind of casually mention that you go to church and where,
Mhm.
and those things are
Mhm.
conversation starters. And,
Right.
we've had a lot of people in our lives who have known for years about the church we go to, and they've only come to like random gatherings. They've never actually come to church. And I'm like,
Mhm.
that's okay too. Like,
Yeah.
seeds are planted. You just never
Yeah.
know when they're going to
Yep.
suddenly be like, okay, we've decided we would like to start going to church. Tell us what time your church starts. And, or maybe it's not your church. Maybe they just want to ask you. I mean, I have a neighbor who was like, I hardly know her. I really hardly know her. And she was like, hey, you teach people about the Bible, right? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, do you think you could tell me like where to start in the Bible? And she's like
Yeah.
60 years old,
Yeah.
55, 60. And I was like, yeah, let's do
Yeah.
that. Like, that's
Yeah.
not hard. Well, why did she know to ask me that?
Yeah.
Because I'm in a book club with her and I show up and drink wine once in a while and read books with her or talk about
Yeah.
books. Like, that's all. Like, I'd hardly have any relationship with her except
Yeah.
for that my presence exists in her life. And
Yeah.
I think that's super cool.
It's very cool.
So, I was thinking about how maybe you're like, oh, I'm like nervous. I don't want to talk to parents or whatever. Well, you at like a sporting event or whatever,
Mm.
usually there is a group thread or an email list or whatever. I was like, something that's really easy to do is throw out like a message like, hey, we're going to have like ice cream sandwiches right after the game on
Mhm.
Saturday or whatever. Just like, we hope you'll stay around. And then everyone just starts casually talking. And you don't have to
Yeah.
go up to somebody on a bleacher and be like, hey, whose mom are you? Which I
Yeah.
do, but not everyone's comfortable with that. But it's not hard to bring a cooler full of like juice boxes or ice cream
Yeah.
sandwiches or something like that and just stick around. And then kids run around and then parents start talking. And
Yep.
those are like really simple things to do.
Yeah.
Or, if you've got, some neighbors, but you don't know them very well and you feel a little awkward being like, hey, do you want to come and hang out just one-on-one? You could just be like, throw out a text to like however many people you know and just be like,
Mhm.
send your kids over at this time. We're having, candy
Mhm.
bars or ice cream sandwiches or, whatever it is.
Well, and same with neighbors or speaking of neighbors, if you're, like, embarrassed to walk up to their door or feel
Mhm,
uncomfortable, wait until they're
mhm.
out in their yard and then, like,
Yeah,
go outside and, like, I mean,
just
that's
wave.
how I don't think I've ever knocked on a new neighbor's door, but as soon as we see them outside, we
Mhm,
wave or we go up and
mhm.
introduce ourselves, and, like, it's so much less pressure, but because
Yep,
also, if you go and knock on their door, then it's like, do they have to let you in? Do they need to come out?
mhm.
Like, whereas if they're just already in their yard doing yard
Yeah,
work or playing catch with their kid and you stop
it's
and say
true.
hi or "Hey, I love your car," or "Your dog's cute, what's its
Mhm,
name?" Like, suddenly
mhm,
you have a little bit to talk about and you can move on,
mhm.
like, there's no pressure, and
Exactly.
so
The door's been
yeah,
open. Well, and maybe you're like, "I don't wanna talk to new people at church." One thing I learned a long time ago, especially if you go to a larger church, you don't always know, has somebody been going here 5 years and they've never
right.
noticed them, is
Mhm,
instead of saying, "Are you new here?"
mhm.
say, "I don't think I've met you."
Yep.
And I will say that to people and they'll be like, "It's my first time." I'm like, "Oh, well, that makes sense why I haven't met
Yes.
you." And then
Yep.
now I'm like, "Well, what brought you here? Where do you live?" Like,
Yeah.
"Do you have kids?" Things like that. And it's like a very easy thing to say, "I don't think I've met you."
Yeah,
And
very
then you will know real quick if they're interested in having a follow-up conversation, if they're like, "Oh, I'm Rachel. I'm gonna go sit down." Like,
true, yeah. And the
so
other thing is that, sometimes something I can get nervous about when I'm meeting someone new is, okay, first of all, what if they're like, "Oh, we actually already met?" Um,
well, I've done that.
yeah,
It's
I
like,
mean,
"Oh,
it's
I'm
annoying.
sorry. I
Yeah.
thought you looked familiar."
Yes, exactly, but also that's a normal human thing. People have done it to us
Mhm,
too, and I mean, I don't get hurt if someone can't remember my name. I totally understand why someone can't remember my name
mhm,
because I can't always, and it's okay to say, "I know we've met, but I cannot remember your name. Like, can you remind that?" I think
yeah,
we get in our head and we forget that if
mhm.
the roles were reversed, we really don't actually care if someone had to ask us to remind them of our to remind
Right.
if I have to
No,
remind them
it
of my
doesn't bother
name,
me at
that
all.
doesn't bother me.
No, it doesn't bother me. Or if I have to make the connection, like, "Oh, actually, our kids were on that, in that one
Yeah,
classroom together." And they're like,
yeah,
"Oh, that's where we've
yeah,
met." It's
yeah,
like, I don't mind that at all.
yeah.
Well, and like maybe you're like, "I don't want to initiate anything ever." Okay,
Mhm,
that's fair-ish. I mean, I would encourage you to challenge you to start initiating some things, but there are a lot of opportunities around our community to go to things that might make you
mhm.
uncomfortable, like a social at the kids' school or a men's night at your church or a women's conference that women are going to or whatever, life
Yeah,
groups, small groups, things like that. And a lot of times people are like, "Yeah, no, that's not me." And then as a
yeah,
result, they never get out of their comfort zone because they
yeah.
never say yes. You don't have to initiate something. Sometimes you just have
Mhm,
to say, "Yes, I will
mhm.
go to that."
It's
You might
true.
hate it and never do it again, which I would encourage you if you do hate it, try it again anyways. I rarely let my kids decide they hate something after one time. I'm like,
Right.
"Excuse me, that's not enough times. Like, you need to
Yeah,
try that again."
yeah,
But living in our bubble is not a way to show the world what Jesus has done in our lives. We have
right.
to be willing to get a little messy, a little uncomfortable, get outside of our bubbles and
Mhm.
be with people. And that's what
Yeah.
Jesus modeled.
Well, because that is our purpose here, is as
Right.
believers, is to show people Jesus. Like,
Yeah. Go and
our
make
purpose
disciples of the nations.
yeah, our purpose is not to just live inwardly. It's not to
Be
just like
comfortable.
Rachel said, just to have our safe people and they're the only ones we talk to about anything that might be challenging or growth or whatever.
Mhm.
It's and not obviously you're not going to go around talking about deep things to every single person you meet.
Right.
But
Mhm.
and you don't and if you're not gonna even connect with every person you meet. Like, there might be a
Mhm.
couple people you connect with, and half of them you guys continue conversations and you start getting together, and half of them you never see again. That's okay, that's
Mhm.
not the point. You don't go chasing people, but that is our purpose, and if we are not intentionally connecting with people outside of our comfort zone, we're missing a huge part of our purpose on
Mhm.
earth, and
Yeah.
so
It's so true. Well, so I gave a sermon on this topic. And my nephew is Melissa's son, who's a senior in high school, and then our other nephew, who's a senior, they were
Mhm,
here. And they came up to me and shared with me what they learned from the message.
mhm.
And one thing they said was, they both said, it never occurred to me that meeting new people was for the gospel. They're like,
Yeah.
I don't really need more friends. I don't really like to meet new people. There was like a very
Mhm,
self-focused thing. And
mhm,
I think they are not alone in that. A lot of adults
mhm.
feel that way. And they're not even 18 yet. And they realize that they're like,
Right.
whoa, it's never occurred to me that God might want me to meet other people
Mhm.
for the purpose of being good news to other people.
Yep. Yep. Yeah,
Well, and
and I mean, it was that's a big eye opener.
Mhm. Yeah, it is. It's very big. Well, and I just, for me, like my testimony is that, I was raised in 100 people who were Christians,
Mhm.
we lived in a very Christ-centered home.
We didn't live with 100 people, we weren't in a commune. Just to clarify.
Everybody I lived with.
It kind of sounded like
I
I
meant
grew up
like
with 100 people.
grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, like
Yes,
so
who
many
had their own
Christians.
homes and their own places.
Yes, not even in the same state.
Not
Definitely not a
even.
commune. And I mean, I grew up in a cult and I still need no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
And we had very Christ-centered home, Christ-following parents, and I
Right.
needed someone else to lead me to
Yeah.
Jesus. That's how
Mhm.
God brought me to Jesus
Yep.
was through someone else, and that person was a college student when I was in middle school. Like, she had no reason to be in my life other
Mhm.
than she got outside her comfort zone and stepped
Yep.
into my messy little world.
Yep. Yep.
And then my challenge is like, how many people around us are not following Jesus, do not know God, they are not saved, there is no redemption, they are lost, they are unfree.
Mhm.
And here we are choosing not to step into their world because we
Right.
prefer to be comfortable.
Right. Ooh.
I mean, yeah, that's
Yeah.
big, right?
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
we
Well,
are
I
so self-focused. Like even, even no matter how much we're following Jesus, we do not tend to think of things. I mean, this is a kingdom perspective, and we
Mhm.
tend not to live this way. What were you going to say?
Well, I was gonna say I've had this visualization. I have no idea if this is how it works, so don't even take my words and
I
count
love
them
when you
as.
preface things like that.
But I have this visualization of me standing before God someday, like face to face, and Him being like, "Look at all these people that you were in their everyday life, and you never, ever
Mhm.
entered their world. Like you never became good news to them. You just kind of lived your own little life alongside theirs, and they never had a chance to meet me,
Mhm.
even though they knew you and you knew me. Like
Mhm.
I've had that visualization throughout my life. Like, oh,
Mhm.
that would be
And
terrible.
to be clear, I don't think Melissa believes she's going to show up and God's going to shame her. I think she's
No,
like,
no, no, no.
this
I
is
would
how
agree.
she gets herself to get out of
Hmm.
that,
Yes,
to step into
I
that kingdom perspective.
yes. If that was a thing where I got the chance, quote unquote, to see the people that I
Mhm.
just didn't ever engage with, that would
Mhm.
break my heart. That
Yes.
if I would have engaged with them, they might have gotten to meet Jesus. Like, and then I
Well,
like, and that didn't
like, yeah, what
happen.
if we get to heaven and we can see all the people that because of our influence are there, but
Mhm.
then we have to see how many people we chose not to influence
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
because of our own, like if you could even see them and you're like, well, look, there's 10 people here. And you're like, go
Yeah.
me. It's like, but
Yeah.
here's 40,000 people. It was like, no.
Less go me.
Again, we
Mm.
don't know. This is not theologically correct. We have no idea
There's
what's going to
nothing in the
happen.
Bible that says this happens. But
But
this
we're
is
beautiful
how
people. And
how my brain works.
exactly, exactly. So the next way we're going to talk about the Jesus modeled community, right? Big people, lots of, getting out there, getting in the crowds. He also had his inner circle. He had his
Mhm.
12 people, and those people were privy to things that everyone else was not. They got to
Yeah.
ask him more questions.
Mhm.
He dialogued with them. He explained things. They'd leave and they'd
Yeah.
be like, "What did that mean?" No one in the crowd got to know this, but
Yeah.
they do, right? Like
Yeah.
they are his
Break it down.
people. Yeah.
Mhm.
He spent more time with them. They got more
They got to,
quality.
like, have inside jokes together. They got to have
Yeah.
experiences and memories together, whereas they would go to town to town to town and leave all these
Mhm.
great messages, but
Mhm.
the big crowds didn't get to be a part of that. They didn't get to have
Exactly.
know Jesus on a personal level like that because
Right.
they only got to see him from the stage, so
Mhm.
to speak, and they got to walk miles and miles and miles with him.
Exactly. Well, and there's plenty of examples in the Bible where it's like, and then Jesus sent the crowd away and he got into a boat with his disciples and
Yep.
left. Or he told his disciples, you get in a boat and go, I'll meet you there. I'm going to make the crowd go away.
Yep.
Or here comes a crowd, quick, get in a boat, let's go.
Run.
There's a little of that too. Like there's
Yeah.
so many times that Jesus was intentional in
Mhm.
about leaving the crowds to be with the small groups. And the reason we're talking about this is because that is where we go deeper.
Yes.
The crowds
Yeah.
are where we share Jesus.
Mhm.
The inner circle is where we go deeper, where there should be challenges and
Mhm.
accountability and confession. And
Yep.
we can call each other out and we can build each other up. And that doesn't happen in large groups. And
No, it just
we have
can't.
to have that inner
Mhm.
circle of people.
Yep.
And
It
I
changes
know
everything. Yeah.
it does
Mhm.
change everything. And maybe you're like, well, I have an inner circle of people, but they don't follow Jesus. Okay.
Mhm.
So my challenge to you would be to find a second inner circle of people. Like maybe it's
Mhm.
your high school friends, your college friends, and they just don't know Jesus. You should
Yeah,
still be good news to them. But
for sure.
find some Christ followers who are like-minded. Iron
Mhm.
sharpens iron. And you
Mhm.
guys, it might take time. It definitely usually takes time. But it's like
Yeah.
if you're not investing in people like at your church, or in your body of believers, and all of your time is spent with people who are non-Christians, I think you need to do both.
Yeah, agreed.
We
Well, I
can't.
mean, Jesus was an example of that also. Like,
Exactly.
he literally hung out with his
Hmm.
Christ-following people, and
Literally, they
then
were
he
Christ
also
following.
went yeah, exactly, literally physically following him,
Yep.
and then he also went and hung out with the people
Right.
who had no faith whatsoever
Right.
and kinda were
And I'm
hated by the public
exactly.
because of whatever, and
Well, and I'm not saying like if your inner circle of friends are all non-Christians, like I'm not saying they can't be good news to you, they can't encourage you, but they're not going to point you back to Christ at the end
right.
of the day.
It
And so
is
I
just
would
a
really
very
mean
different kind of conversation when you're
it
talking to someone
is.
who has a relationship with Jesus versus someone who doesn't,
It is.
and it's
And
not a judgment thing, it's just a
nope,
reality.
it is a reality. Yeah. Well, yeah. It's like talking about your child, your parenting woes with a parent
Mhm,
versus like a grandparent or a
mhm,
non-parent.
mhm.
Grandparents, they have forgotten everything. They can't
Yeah.
remember anything.
They only remember the good.
Or even if like you have toddlers and you're lamenting, you don't necessarily want to talk to someone who only has teenagers. It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
they could be good news, but you really need sometimes to talk to somebody who is like in that
right
same
there in
boat
it
with
with you,
you.
yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm,
And so, maybe you're like, well, I don't even have an inner circle of people. It's just like me and my husband and my kids or whatever.
mhm,
I have been there and it's incredibly lonely. And I just want to encourage you, start asking God today to bring you those people. Start praying today. It took me years from the time I started really realizing I don't have an inner circle of people. Everybody knows me, but like nobody's claiming me.
mhm.
It took years, like 2 or 3 years before I really found an inner circle.
Yeah,
And it takes time and it takes intentionality and it takes a lot of prayer. But I believe everybody should have an inner circle of
mhm.
Jesus following Christians who are going to iron sharpen iron with
Well,
you.
and then I know that there is a chunk of you out there who are like, "I don't want an inner circle. I
Mhm.
don't need people in my space. I am I've always taken care of myself. I don't need to
Mhm.
rely on other people." And I know this because I have very close people in my life who that is how they thought for a long time. One of my best friends, that was her. And now she has an inner circle
Mhm.
and is like, "What did I think? How did I ever think I could do
Mhm.
this without you guys?" Like, and it's
Mhm.
scary letting people in. And so I know that
Mhm.
a lot of you are thinking, I've not been able to trust people very well. People have hurt me.
Mhm.
I've had Christians hurt me. I've had the church hurt me.
Mhm. Yep.
I've had so many people hurt me. Like I said, I've always just had to rely on myself. If you are in a relationship with Jesus, trust him enough that when
Mhm.
you ask him to bring you the small circle of people that you can
Mhm.
trust, that they're not going to hurt you. I mean, we always hurt each other because we're
Right,
human,
right.
but like aren't
Mhm.
going to actually hurt you, like not intentionally. That there will be an apology right away, like, oh, that was
Mhm.
unintentional, that kind
Mhm.
of thing. Because trusting your heart with other people
Mhm.
it grows your faith. Like there's
It
something
does.
about it that just
Mhm.
it grows your relationship with Jesus. And
It does. I absolutely
Mhm.
agree with that. Well, I was just like thinking about how many times in the last like 2, 3 months, someone close to me in my inner circle has called me out and been like, you're not trusting Jesus there. Or have you prayed about that? Or
Mhm.
sounds like you're listening to lies. Or
Yeah.
even Melissa when she was like, Rachel, I think you have an eating disorder. And I was like, what?
Mhm.
I don't think I do. Well, I did.
Yeah.
It's like I needed someone who was in a position that could ask me that hard question. Like
Yeah.
I told Melissa at one point in our marriage stuff, which I've talked about in a different podcast, I said, I don't want to go to therapy with him. He just needs to go by himself. And she said,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't think that's okay. I
Mhm.
really don't. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, who asked you? No, I didn't say that. I was like, of course you would say that.
Mhm.
And then I'm like, okay, you're right. And I text my husband, all right, put me on the books for the next therapy
Yeah.
session because she's
Mhm.
right. And if I'm just sitting there just in my relationship with Jesus alone, I might not
Yeah.
have gotten that same thing. And I do
Right.
think she's right. And there have been plenty of times when I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And Melissa's like, I don't think that's biblical. I don't think that's
Yeah.
okay. And I'm like,
Yeah. And vice versa,
and,
of course.
and vice versa. Of course, I'm just
Mhm.
talking about my own personal experience. And that
Yeah.
only comes from having that deep
Mhm.
connection with people who are following Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, because I believe fully that God uses people in our life to speak to us. Now, we want to be careful that we're
Mhm.
not like, God said to tell you, blah, blah, blah. Like, we
Right.
need to be careful. But if
And we
Rachel
talk about that in
knows,
an episode as well.
yeah, Rachel knows, and I know with Rachel that we are praying on each other's behalf. We're not going to just give unsolicited opinion. In fact, I knew
Right.
Rachel had an eating disorder for a long time before I felt like God was like, and now you can say
Now
it
it's time to
because
say it.
she was not ready to hear it. Like it was
Mhm.
very clear
Mhm.
because I would kind of like hint about it and it was whoop, shut down. And like, and I
Mhm.
would pray a lot about it. And God was like, just, we'll get there. Like, and we
Mhm.
did.
Yep.
We got to a place where I could
Absolutely.
say it and she was ready to receive it. And it transformed her life. Like,
Mhm.
and not because me, because of God, but waiting on his
Mhm.
timing. And so,
Mhm. We
yeah.
actually talked about those kinds of things in the series we did on learning our words matter. It was
Mhm.
this season. So if you're like, "Ooh, I want to hear more about that," go back and listen to that because we talked a lot about how do we know when to speak into someone's life? How do we know when the Holy Spirit's talking to us? Things like that.
Yeah.
So, and then the
Good
last,
memory.
I do have a good memory, but also I write the episodes, I write the episode
That's
descriptions,
true.
I put the show
And
notes.
you edit them, and people are like, "Which one just released?" I'm like, "I don't know."
No, you're like, I'd have to be on looking on social media. So yeah, I edit them, I put the dates in,
Mhm.
so the last point that we're going to talk about is that Jesus also withdrew from his inner circle to spend time
Yeah.
alone with God. And there are
Yes.
so many times where he's like, sit here, I'm going to go pray. And he
Yes.
goes up a mountain and he prays, or he goes on a boat by himself and he
Yep.
prays, or he just retreats privately to
Yeah.
pray. And our point in that is our community is better served. Our inner circle and our larger community, our families too, are better served
Mhm.
when we have alone time with God.
Yes.
So we're kind of like, we're in this place where we feel like there's 3 things we need to be doing and not one of us is exempt from any of them.
Mhm.
Like if we're going to follow the model of Jesus,
Mhm.
and it starts with having alone time with God. I know we
Yeah.
started with Jesus being with groups, but it
Yeah.
started with alone time with God, having
Yeah.
that deep reliance on him where he is speaking into our lives and he is confirming things, but then taking it into your inner circle and
Mhm.
growing together deeper, challenging,
Yep.
and then the last one is embracing new people so we can be part of bringing the good news to the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
And the first one leads us to the second one, and the second one allows us to be filled up and challenged, and then we overflow onto our
Mhm.
community. And that's the
Mhm.
hope, is we don't start with the community piece. You start with the
Yeah.
God piece
Yeah.
and you go deeper with the your small group piece, and then
Mhm.
you're overflowing onto your community. Some
Yeah.
of us, it'll have to be more intentional based on our personalities and our skills and our giftings,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, it becomes a lot more natural when those first two things are locked into place.
Correct. Agreed. For sure. Yeah.
Oh,
Was that a lot of good affirmation? Correct.
it
Agreed.
was
For
excellent.
sure. Yeah.
Thank you for being so affirming.
I kind of have to go to the bathroom, and I feel like I'm
You're like
focusing on not
dancing.
having to go to the bathroom. Yeah.
Well, why don't you go to the bathroom? And I'm just going to talk about this very last thing, which was we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the fact that community has its shortcomings. Melissa's going to go potty.
All right.
And community has its shortcomings. People hurt people. People say things that don't sit well with us. We are or not invited to a thing we think we should be invited to. People sometimes challenge us in a way we're not ready to change it. And there is a model of that with Jesus too. So his disciple Peter, one of his closest friends, kind of got a lot wrong. Peter didn't understand Jesus a lot. He misunderstood Jesus. He misrepresented Jesus at times. He messed up. He got upset and cut the ear off of somebody when Jesus was like, "Excuse me." I mean, he didn't say that. That's not in the Bible. But I believe he was like, "Seriously, Peter, like get yourself together." And but he was one of his best friends. And then when Jesus was being arrested to go die, Peter denied that he even knew him 3 times. So Peter is a prime example of Jesus having this close-knit community and he still hurt him. Jesus was betrayed by Judas. Jesus knew and what it was to be hurt by other humans. And yet he would have known that going into it. And he still chose to have that inner circle of people. Melissa's back.
I'm
we're,
back.
we're talking about how community is messy.
Mhm.
But the thing is Jesus didn't need people to validate him or make him know his worth. And
Mhm.
that's what he did when he escaped to be with God. He needed the validation of God,
Yeah.
who God was, who God said Jesus was, what mission God sent him on, and what Jesus needed to do to surrender to God's will. I mean, there was a lot of that, him surrendering to God's will.
Yeah.
And so he didn't go to the people to make him feel better. He went to
Right.
God to solidify who he was and what he was supposed to be doing.
Yes.
And so that's what we're supposed to be doing. And that's why that last thing we talked about is the most important part, because community is almost always messy and it is almost never perfect. But if we want to live like Jesus, this is the example we're going to follow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's good stuff.
yeah, it is. It really is. I want to read this quote that I thought was so powerful. It says, "Here's what I know. People are broken and messy and imperfect. They fail me time and time again, and I need them anyway.
Mhm.
It's a beautiful mystery. So often when God bends low to restore my soul, he does it through broken, imperfect people. I've
Yes.
swung from desperately looking for humans to heal me to building walls to keep everyone out. Neither works very well.
Mhm.
In the middle, we find balance. we can trust in God to transform us, knowing He wants to use the people He's placed in our lives to do it. So the work starts with communing with God, being shaped and molded by our more intimate inner circle, and then overflowing onto our communities.
I
In
love
any
that.
way God wants to use us, through popsicles or fruit roll-ups or whatever way. I mean, it does not need to be these huge, massive things. You don't even have to formally join any sort of ministry.
Mhm.
It
Oh,
could be as
yeah.
simple as a lemonade stand your kids want to do, right?
Yes, yes. Oh, agreed. Ministry should be lived out all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You do not have to be a part of a group to be good news to people.
Well, and if
And
you are doing formal ministry, you should still be living it out.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
it shouldn't just be showing up in those hours, like that time frame. Yeah.
exactly.
My husband does ministry through BMX in a way that I can't even explain. He has gotten so
Mm-hmm.
many people to BMX because he's passionate about BMX, and
Mm-hmm.
then he has these amazing conversations and his good news, and
Mm-hmm.
we've had people come to our church because of BMX,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yep.
he does ministry through
There's no
on the go
website.
like that.
There's no
Mhm.
social media. There's no
Nope.
business card. It's just Bill
Yeah.
living out his
Uh-huh.
life for Jesus.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so, I mean, Melissa and I think that all three of these steps are important. And we really challenge you to consider, which one of these are you hung up on?
Yeah.
Which one is keeping you from doing all three? And
Mhm.
ask God, change my way of thinking. Like, help me to be open to how you choose to do so. And after I gave this message, I had a lot of people come up, people who are very involved in my church. And they were like, ooh, for me, it's the big groups. I just want to be with my comfortable people. I
Mhm.
was challenged, right? Like,
Mhm.
and it's like, this is between you and God. He
Yeah.
is the one who's going to do the work. It starts with asking Him to
Yeah.
do the work. So,
Yes.
yeah,
Well, that was good. I like it.
good. All right, you guys. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
You might feel that your life is a mess, but don't feel bad. Ours is too, but we own a microphone and we have no shame. That's why we'll talk about how our life is a mess nonetheless. That's the name of our podcast.